Hello. This is Alisia Young, and welcome to Teach Me Freedom. This podcast is about learning how to live a freer life from authors, entrepreneurs, and experts. Those who have done it and who teach others how to do it as well, and what it feels like while applying those methods to our lives along the way. Every episode will deliver resources, anecdotes, and/or reviews to support you in living a more freedom-filled life. Let's jump in. Please note the video version of this episode is available on YouTube at Teach Me Freedom. The link is also mentioned in the show notes. Enjoy. Freedom Finders, welcome to part 2 of the conversation with Dave Richo about his book, How to Be an Adult, a handbook on psychological and spiritual integration. We last left off talking about meditation and then some connections we were seeing with meditation, and just an understanding that there are things happening beyond what we're able to see, and the importance of being able to let go. So now let's continue where we left off. Okay, so in that case, let's go on to assertiveness. And so one of the aspects that I really enjoyed about your book is how you go deeper into the aspects of the ego. And so you talk about different aspects of the ego. You talk about the healthy ego versus the fearful ego versus the belligerent ego. And you kind of start off from the aspect of assertiveness, which you defined as owning your power. And you talk about what it is, what it isn't. And this was very relevant because it brought that idea of people pleasing, of feeling obligated to do certain things depending on certain situations, imposter syndrome. Made me think about, like, for example, I know myself, I can be extremely sensitive sometimes. And so I'm not assertive sometimes. And so you talked about healthy ego means that you broke it down into 3 actions, one of which is being clear, and 2, asking for what you want, and 3, taking responsibility. And you differentiated that with passivity, which is giving your power away. And this is where the fearful ego operates from. And I find myself operating from that in a lot of different situations. And it reminded me of the neurotic ego as well. And then
yes.
You also talked about aggressiveness, which is changing power to control. And you also define this as, or you also mentioned that this is the belligerent ego. So can you expand on these things in the relationship to being an adult?
Well, first of all, you've done a very good job summarizing it.
Well, thank you.
Basically, assertiveness happens because you really believe you have a right to be on the planet. And it's okay that you let people know who you are, and you're clear about that, as you said, and what you want. And what you want really is about expressing your needs, which is so important to do in any relationship. And then finally, to take responsibility rather than to blame others, including our parents, for the shape our life has taken. And those 3 together, being clear, asking for what we want, taking responsibility, is the equivalent of assertive adulthood. And I just imagine that we are sometimes afraid to go there because we think it's going to put us on the spot, or people won't like us if we really speak up for ourselves, or people may retaliate against us. In order to be assertive, you would have to let go of all of that concern. So that is part of what we're just trying to do. Assertiveness is right in the center, the middle way. When you overly assert, that becomes aggressive, and you're pushing people and controlling them. Mm-hmm. And when you just stand by and don't speak up, that's passivity. So it's passive, not speaking up when you would really need to, assertive when you do speak up, and aggressive when you turn the speaking up into demanding.
Mm.
And once again, the adult is the person who realizes that the functional way of doing things is the assertive way, not the passive or aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Functional meaning what will help you get the job done? What is the job? To achieve whatever your particular goal is.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the goal might be to have a healthy relationship. Well, you wouldn't be able to have a healthy relationship with anybody if you weren't clear about your interests and motivations, you weren't expressive of your needs, and you weren't taking responsibility for your own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're assertive, you would no longer say, you made me angry.
Yeah.
You would say, when you did this, I felt angry. I know the anger is my responsibility, but I do want to let you know that that's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the being clear and
Yes.
taking responsibility. And then the middle part you're also doing because you expressed it. So that's the assertive. That's the asking for what I want.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm asking is that something change here so that I can have a better relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't make me angry. That's where I went. But you did something that is the catalyst for it. So let's look at it together
Mm-hmm.
and see if we can have a better relationship. That's what you sound like when you're assertive.
And then realizing that they may choose to be like, well, I'm going to leave. As scary as it may feel in that moment, it's like, as opposed to being passive and being like, okay, I'm just going to tolerate it because I'm terrified of you leaving my life, versus like blackmailing them into staying with you. Like, I know so much about you and you are going to stay, you're going to change otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I wish I read this during that relationship. That comes to mind. But yes, and as you say this, and I know you were touching upon this previously, you were talking about fears as well. And
I have a chapter on fear, a chapter on anger, and a chapter on guilt, which are three challenges in our adult life. But fear is the main one.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, what's your question about that?
Yes. So I wanted to read what you wrote in your book because I love how you phrased it. You wrote that every problem is something we are having trouble integrating. This tells us that fear is somewhere at the bottom of every obstacle we face. Locating the fear element helps us work through it with more consciousness. And I really love this because, as I was sharing with you previously, I studied naturopathic medicine, and one of the key things that we'd focus on is what is the root cause of anybody's health concerns. And same with when it comes to eating disorders, like what are your emotions that you are running away from, which is contributing to these like these ways of compensating. And so I love how you just simplified it. So would like to know, what led to this discovery? Because it really lets us know what we need to work on if we want to overcome obstacles.
Very simple, just my own fears, of which there are many. And I just realized that fear was at the bottom of most of my concerns, worries, issues. And that once I identified the fear element and bring it out into the open, I'm able to deal with it a lot better. And in the book, I suggest a very specific way of working with fear, which is an example of assertiveness. First, you admit that's being clear. First, you admit that you are afraid, and you can admit this to yourself and to someone you trust. Secondly, you allow the fear, let yourself have that feeling. Don't try to run away from it. Don't try to do something so that you can avoid it. Just sit there and let that fear go through you like lightning through a lightning rod and go back to the earth. And then finally, go ahead and do whatever you need to do. Don't let the fear stop you or drive you.
Mm.
So you're going to have the fear, but you're not going to let the fear take over. And in addition to this, I now suggest using affirmations that help you get over your fear. So what I've done is I taken the affirmations and I put them on a YouTube.
Oh.
And it's free to go to, or you can just watch it on the website. So if you go to the website, davericho.com, and go to free articles, I think it's the first one. It's called Affirmations for Letting Go of Fear.
Oh, that's great.
And you can listen just audio, or you can watch some slides in the background. But it's just as easy to simply listen, and you can download it onto your phone and kind of listen to it once a day. That really helps getting over the fears because it points them out and you hear yourself affirming that you're no longer going to be driven or stopped by the fears. See, we don't get rid of our fears. We just can no longer be stopped or driven by them. That's the goal. The goal is not to get rid of the fears. That's a useless project because we're all going to have fears every day.
Mm-hmm.
But we certainly don't have to act on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I also love how you use that example of like a lightning bolt, just kind of feel it, let it go through.
Let it go through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't try to stop.
Yeah. Kind of similar to meditation with the thoughts, just let them go through. So the last thing I'd like to talk with you about is the shadow archetype. And then in case we have to hang up right after the call, I usually ask each guest about 3 resources that they'd recommend our listeners look into.
Okay, I can tell you. Yeah, I can tell you 2 resources on that.
Cool. Okay, great. Okay.
The first is my book is called whole book on the shadow.
Oh,
It's called Shadow Dance.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the other book.
Okay.
Secondly, I gave a talk on the shadow, which is also a YouTube. So just put in Dave Richo Shadow and you can watch the talk. It's 2 hours long.
Cool.
And by shadow, it's a Jungian term referring to the parts of ourselves that we have disavowed or repressed because they don't seem socially acceptable. Mm-hmm. Or we have such low self-esteem that we can't imagine we have such powers in us. Another way of approaching it is to say what Jung says, which is that the shadow has 2 sides, positive and negative. The negative shadow, that's the part that we have repressed because it's socially unacceptable impulses, such as selfishness or addictive craving. You know, we hide certain things about ourselves, even from ourselves. Mm. Or it could be positive. We have wonderful talents and gifts, but we can't admit that we have them. And in the How to Be Adults, I show the difference. And everybody has this shadow side, and you just have to acknowledge it. And the best way to acknowledge it is very simple. It's through what's called projection. What you dislike most in others could be what's hidden in you that you haven't acknowledged. That's the negative shadow. What you admire most in others, that could show you the wonderful gifts that you have that you haven't yet believed yourself to be capable of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's kind of a big topic, and we can't really do it justice in this short time, but if you watch the YouTube, I think you'll get the basic concept.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and definitely check out your book as well, the chapter on it. I'm intending to read the book about it as well. And as you shared that, it reminded me a lot of, I remember a concept when I studied naturopathic medicine. We studied traditional Chinese medicine as well. And we learned about like the 5 elements and then yin and yang. So that like symbol of a circle with like a curve
Mm-hmm.
S down the middle, and then like a black dot in the white half, and then a white dot in
Yes.
the black half, and that whole balance. And as you said, integration, like honoring both sides, honoring the feminine and the masculine, the hot and the cold, all of that. So as you talked about the shadow, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's coming together.
Yeah, and that image that you just mentioned, that's a perfect symbol for the shadow.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool. Awesome.
That we
So
have both
cool.
sides in us.
Yes. And so, Dave, once again, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up this like really quick and fun deep
Well, I just
episode?
wanted to say thank you to you for such a lovely interview, and I wish you
Pleasure. Thank
good luck in
you.
your work, and I
Thank
hope what I
you.
said was helpful.
Absolutely. Really, really enjoyed and really loved the opportunity and honor of getting to speak with you. And
No,
thank you
I
for
did
putting your
too.
gift, your gift out there. Because otherwise, like, how would we have connected? So thank you so much for taking the time to pen that down and sharing your knowledge and that depth with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Freedom Finders. Thank you so much for listening.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Teach Me Freedom podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and found it beneficial. Feel free to reach out to us at teachmefreedom2020@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the show on your favorite platform for streaming content. Feel free to comment and leave a 4 or 5-star review if you feel so inclined. Connect with you next time.